You know, I realized the other day that I have a lot of great games in my collection. The Chronicles of Riddick set, Prey 2006 and Prey 2017, Eternal Darkness, Sanity's Requiem, Fatal Frame 2, Devil May Cry 3, every James Bond game on the GameCube, and about 1,000 more. I even have a PS4 with PT still installed on it from about 10 years ago. But here I am, playing a sequel to a game that pissed me off almost the entire time I played it. And do you know why I'm doing this? Because I love you. God damn it. So, credit has to be given up front. State of Emergency 2 at least has a story. Is it good? Is it original? Does it end with a satisfying conclusion? No, no, and no. But at least there is a tale. The first State of Emergency barely had what could be considered a plot, and even that's being generous. At the end of the first game, the group of freedom fighters, appropriately named Freedom, had stormed the headquarters of the American Trade Organization, aka the Corporation, and overtook their broadcast system. Freedom sent out a call to arms for all the oppressed citizens of Capital City. It was a plea to rise up and rebel, to take back your liberties, to fly untethered once more. Pretty triumphant. The sequel, set 4 years later, sees the corporation doing better than ever. The denizens of Capital City are even worse off, and the leader of Freedom, Roy McNeil, is set to be executed on national television. So I guess their plan worked out. Again, at least they tried to make something out of nothing. All of the playable characters from the first game are back, and early on, the idea is to get the band back together. Libra, the sneaky field agent, Freak, the geeky hacker-type dude with the painfully early 2000s spiky hair, which is somehow better than the ultra-douchey white visor that he had in the first game. Eddie Raymond, aka Bull, Roy McNeil, sans his awesome red Hawaiian shirt, and last but not least, the cover boy himself, Spanky, all return and are fully voiced, interacting in actual cutscenes this time. The dialogue is usually boring and completely forgettable, but there is a funny joke about selecting to upgrade your standard execution method if you wish.
Termination system. Please wait for your termination to commence. You have been selected for a standard termination. If you wish to upgrade, please speak after the tone. McNeil, Mac.
That's literally the only funny thing in this game, save for the unintentional comedy of Spanky's voice, which sounds like Wario if he grew up in El Paso.
Oh, you gotta be shitting me!
Mac and Bull are busted out of prison to carry on the crusade with Freedom. Yup, Bull is back, and aw, look at his little smile. He's so happy to see his friend. After some sleuthing from Libra, Freedom finds out about the corporation's master plan. They've developed a drug called Empyreon, which is being discreetly introduced to humanity by incorporating doses into food, medicine, and illegal substances. Evidently, Empyreon targets and pacifies specific regions of our nervous system to quell our violent tendencies, and Freedom sets out to stop this. So, let me see if I understand this. The corporation is microdosing the world with a drug that keeps people from killing each other, and this band of merry misfits, who, by the way, kill hundreds of these citizens, want to go on further rampages to stop this corporation. This way, people can continue to kill each other in the streets, and Spanky gets to make a fortune off of those same citizens by keeping them addicted to his illicit street drugs. This is the problem with people who advocate for complete freedom at any cost. They're the ones who secretly wish to become the new swinging dick on the block, and almost always through violent coercion to suit their needs. Oh, Jesus Christ, I'm analyzing State of Emergency 2 like it's Don Quixote. It's a dumbass third-person shooter.
You looking for a good time, sugar?
Yeah. For a low-budget PS2 game, State of Emergency 2 is not the worst thing I've ever seen, and it runs well enough. Had this come out in maybe 2003, it could have been more forgivable, but at this point, Ratchet & Clank Up Your Arsenal, God of War, Shadow of the Colossus, and 2 Metal Gears had already been out on this console, and this was the year that Dead Rising and Gears of War released. This is not that. Good things first. There are some okay-ish, decent-ish lighting and wet reflections. Look, this isn't BRDF and Fresnel transmissions at their highest caliber, but I'm a simple ape and a massive sucker for rainy, moody, atmospheric stuff in video games. And as acceptable as this dystopian nighttime atmosphere is, it feels wildly out of place in a sequel to State of Emergency. The first game, while not a graphical powerhouse per se, had a big, bold, vivid color palette that popped off the screen and was a pleasure to look at. It was the type of game that would stop you in the mall if you walked by a demo in the window. The second game, by comparison, is so drab and washed out. It doesn't make things edgy, brooding, or more artistic. It makes everything boring. An effect that I really dislike in any game is when the player is obnoxiously cued for a low health status. God of War had an annoying, thumping heartbeat. Twisted Metal Head On had an announcer repeat that your health was low, and State of Emergency 2 has this pulsing red filter that covers the entire screen until you find a medkit. A throbbing, veiny effect. There are a couple of decent little additions. The animation for enemies going prone was kinda neat the first few times. And when you run through crowds of people, you'll actually knock them over instead of just clipping right through them, which thankfully doesn't slow you down a bit. There's also a quality of life improvement in the form of a mini-map, which I'm pretty sure is something I whinged about when I reviewed the first game. It helps to get around, though they removed the full-size map in its stead. Overall, State of Emergency 2 looks like Hull, except most Hulls have more color. Don't ask me how I know. They sound better too.
You think you slick, you punk-ass, blasphemous, dope-fiend bitch? I had my Jimmy whacked 7 times last week.
Overall, the audio design is the sonic equivalent of Necco wafers. Just, why? The music is very generic and completely forgettable. The voice acting is, well, there are words that are spoken. Sound effects are stock standard, but I will say that there were times when I was caught off guard by some fairly solid ambiance. Running through the ghetto is spanky. I noticed a really nice, moody blend of crowd chatter, the sounds of citizens battling, sirens wailing elsewhere, helicopters buzzing by, and the corporate propaganda echoing over a PA through the streets. It's not dripping with atmosphere like Neo Tokyo and Timesplitters 2, but it was still serviceable. As I say, there is voice acting. It's not especially good, but at least there was something.
The corporation is moving into the narcotics business right here in the ghetto.
Matter? Why am I hearing about this from him? What do you people do all day?
Kinda. Hey, so I wanted gameplay to be last because I wanted you to digest what you were seeing. Let it simmer. Did you notice something? Something missing, perhaps? The riots! Where are they? For a reason I'll probably never understand, Viz Entertainment, South Peak, DC Studios, I don't know, decided that they would shift away from a chaotic, pseudo-sandbox riot simulator in favor of a more traditional third-person shooter. It's a strange decision, considering how big of a deal the original formula was for its day. State of Emergency 1 was not a very good game. Take my word for it, I just played through it a few months ago. But when you're running down streets packed with hundreds of people, destroying property and body slamming corporate cops, there's still a lot of fun to be had. If DC Studios had taken that formula, added some quality of life improvements, and did away with the ultra repetitive, frustrating missions, they could have had an honest-to-God classic on their hands with this sequel. But no. State of Emergency 2 has one riot in an urban setting, with the prison riot being a kind of lukewarm appetizer. The idea here is that you destroy some corporate property and stir a bit of din before the citizens around you decide to join in. This prompts riot police to rush in, allowing you to nab some tear gas from them. That's the extent of it. It's bizarre. I'm not saying the whole game needed to be a clone of the first. Hey, changing things up with some vehicle segments, adding actual cutscenes with a little story, and giving the characters some actual personality, I'm all for it. But to almost completely erase the big selling point of the series, only to pepper in a half-baked, farty riot section in a small square area with all of the charm of Berlin in spring of 1945, Christ. Do not fix what is not broken. However, I have to say, this is absolutely not the worst game I've ever played. I can even say with confidence that I raged 10 times more during the first State of Emergency than I did with the sequel, and I almost physically bit my copy of Batman Rise of Sin Tzu. Yeah, it was real mature, whatever. The problem is not that the gameplay here is bad, it's that the unique hook of the original game was disbanded in favor of a completely generic third-person action game. The weapons, for instance, are about as vanilla as it gets, and they lack the sensation of force, recoil, muzzle flip, muzzle flash, and that satisfying thunderous clap that the best video games convey to the player. The only weapon that really kind of rips is the shotgun. Thankfully, enemies are not bullet sponges, which makes it super satisfying to lay out 6 or 7 of them in a flurry of shot shell, with chunks of stuff flying everywhere. And it's a Spaz 12, which, if you watch my review of Fear, you'll know my love for this weapon in video games. You want to go ahead and watch that, by the way? Sniping is halfway decent. It's nothing you haven't seen 10 billion times before, and the somewhat floaty aiming takes some getting used to, but I don't know, I guess I just found the sweet spot of it. And landing a satisfying head pop is always a delight. The rest of the weapons in the game are kind of whatever. You get a pistol, an M16, a grenade launcher attachment for the M16, a rocket launcher, remote mines, hand grenades, an MP5, and a short-barreled Uzi. These are fine and all, but did you notice something that was missing? Any particular weapon that you'd expect to be here? That's right, melee. Like the Riot gameplay, melee combat was inexplicably removed from the sequel as well. Why? Part of the appeal with the first State of Emergency was picking up any ordinary object and bashing someone, or laying someone out with a Jerry Lawler-esque piledriver. It's what made Dead Rising so awesome as well. Maximize this, capitalize on it, add even more stuff to wield, man. It doesn't have to be silly or over the top like having a badger on a stick or something that the people behind Dead Rising 4 would have found funny, but to take out melee combat entirely? Come on, guy, what the fuck? Now the focus is all firearms. They also added tactical moves like leaning. It may seem like an odd inclusion, and it is, but it can be used to pick off annoying enemies when you're trying to conserve health. Also, State of Emergency 2 actually gives you health kits, unlike the first game, which alleviates a bit of the frustration. Oh, and they added drone guns. It's about as exciting as that sentence. It's basically a camera with a gun. Hooray. Throughout the game, there are levels when you can swap to another character. Sometimes characters get special abilities. It's not that exciting. The idea has a ton of potential, and it's been done well in other games before, but it's squandered here. For instance, playing as Bull doesn't grant you greater health or a special attack. He just breaks padlocks with his fists.
You guys suck! Well, I hope you are. I ain't gonna say it, but I would.
Spanky's special abilities are dual wielding, obesity, and interrogating people. So, a few of you commented on my first State of Emergency review, letting me know how bad this interrogation feature is. And after playing it for myself, it's just kinda It's a mini game where you time a button press to hit the sweet spot. It's kind of like kicking field goals in Madden. Do this 3 times and you'll succeed. Go too far and you'll kill the hostage. I failed a few times and it was mildly annoying, but honestly I picked it up pretty quick. It's a lame minigame, but I was expecting a lot worse, and I'd rather do this 10 times over before protecting a hacker in the first game ever again. Spanky can also assemble and command small gangs of fighters to back him up. This is kind of like Freedom Fighters, minus the incredible soundtrack, rich, beautiful atmosphere, and stellar gameplay. You know what? As I'm writing this, I realize that State of Emergency got a sequel and Freedom Fighters still has not. I'll tell you what though, the gangs did actually help out a few times. Not due to their intelligence, God no. But having 7 or 8 meat shields to absorb some of the damage was of great use. And it made me want to play Freedom Fighters again, which, as a reminder, has still not received a goddamn sequel. Libra's highlight is being able to scale walls with her little bat hook or whatever it is. It's as fun as that sentence was to type. You move in a straight line, stopping to blast corporate thugs as they pop out of windows along the way. My strategy of attempting skill failed me, so on my second try, I simply hurtled toward the earth and somehow won. State of Emergency 2 also attempts to incorporate stealth, but that's being super generous. The character you control can crouch walk. Kinda. They squat like they're clenching a massive fibrous stovepipe turd between their cheeks, and they bob up and down like a buoy. Despite having a mini-map, enemies aren't marked on it, and there are no indicators of detection or how much concealment the player has, nothing. The only real stealthy quality, if you want to call it that the game affords you is that the AI is so brutally dumb that they don't notice their buddy's corpse beside them. Or they do this. Long story short, it's easier to shoot through everyone because, thank Jesus, there are no fail states. The last big feature that was incorporated into the sequel are the vehicle sections. Again, credit where credit's due, the team really tried to sprinkle in a diverse array of things to commandeer. And it's all pretty standard and kind of bland, but I'm not going to sit here and say that it was outright bad. Helicopter piloting is pretty good. This is not Battlefield 3, don't get me wrong, but the twin stick controls were easy to pick up. Unfortunately, the objectives are as boring as picking up dog poop, but at least the flying was okay. As bland as they are, at least the helo missions are quick and easily digestible. It's cotton candy, not very nutritious, but satisfying in small portions. Well, with that said, the tank missions are like eating hard, dry hotel bagels. Ugh. Look, tank missions are notoriously slow and laborious in most video games, which sucks because real tanks get up to 50 miles an hour. Sorry, bruv. That's 80 kilos per hour, governor. Sorry, I wanted to include my friends from across the pond in this review. But be careful, guys. Don't repost this on Twitter, you might get sent to jail. Look, slow is fine. It can build up tension. But these sections are very boring. Shipyards are lame as levels in gaming as it is. Rusting metal boxes. Yay. To commandeer one of these things in the first place is weird too. Bull has to dodge tank shells as he runs up and plants tear gas in the tank's vent. Call of Duty 2, this is not. And speaking of COD, remember how awesome the mission Team Player was in Modern Warfare 2? Rolling down Victory Street with a minigun turret surrounded by your Ranger buddies? Wouldn't that be fun to play right now? Yeah, well, too bad. We get this. Do I even need to comment? You also get to control an armored personnel carrier that doesn't carry any personnel. It does have a turret though. In theory, this is kinda cool, but this is no Arkham Knight. Enemy APCs roll up on a predetermined line and stop until you trade ordnance with it. The cheap, boxy model crumples and disappears, and you win. It's hardly, dynamic. Destroying shops is kinda fun, but it was so much better on foot in the first game. Then you get a speedboat. I was not expecting aquatic action, but there you are. At first, you'll man a turret on the boat that locks onto enemy vehicles. Are you starting to see the trend? You can really tell they're bad guys because they have shark teeth painted on their boats. Then the game gives you control of the boat itself. You have to chase this random bad guy and lob mortars at his boat to damage it. I spent like 8 minutes meandering about this aquatic abortion since they deemed it unnecessary to provide the player with a trajectory indicator. Because why would you? After the boat section, you randomly get a boss fight against some guy. They call him a psychotic military genius, but who is this dude? And why is he pumping his nards at me? At least this guy knew what he was involved in. So, General Mayhem runs a few laps and cheers himself on until you whittle away his health bar. It's also really fun to run down this long bridge, fighting off waves of the same troops over and over. It's also a real blast to get knocked down while trying to make progress. This is like your stupid uncle that thinks he's funny by slamming the brakes while you're trying to sip your soda. Like, we get it. The final scenario sees our so-called heroes stealing a brimstone bomb from the deck of a boat. It's really cool that this super destructive explosive device capable of leveling the entire island is just kind of relaxing in the sun, but there you go again. The idea is that you drag it to Stark Tower here and detonate it. They tell you this thing can destroy the whole island, by the way. I didn't make that up. After a few fumbles, I finally set the bomb and, just like that, a massive nuclear explosion erupts, presumably killing everyone on the island, as well as releasing God knows what into the environment for decades to come. And that's it. The game just ends. The heroes don't celebrate with a nice pizza, nothing. So, in addition to eco-terrorism, Freedom wipes out a shitload of innocent people to destroy some corporate property. They don't, assassinate key figures behind the development and distribution of Empyrean. They don't supplant the corrupt world leaders with decent people. They don't do anything to uplift the controlled and downtrodden citizens of Capital City. This game is cheeks. Well, there you have it. State of Emergency 2. The game sold roughly 80,000 copies and received middling reviews across the board, with the general consensus that it was a bland, boring third-person game that strayed from the successful riot-simulator format. I don't claim to understand how hard it must be to make a video game, much less when development is passed around to different studios. Look at how Manhunt 2 turned out, for instance. So I don't want to sit in my high tower and take a poo on DC Studios. But regardless of that, this wasn't the worst game I've ever played, and if I'm being honest, it was a mostly painless 3 to 4 hours. And as I said, the first game pissed me off way more. It's just, there's a bunch of stuff they tried to introduce to break up the formula, but it's all just very bare bones and lame. There's no flair, there's no passion. There was a local multiplayer mode that included TDM, Last Man Standing, Deathmatch, Battle, and Flag Attack. I played about 10 minutes of it against bots, and it felt like Diet SOCOM. The arcade mode includes modes like sniper challenges, helicopter challenges, chaos mode from the first game, rocket challenges, and some speedboat challenges, amongst a few others. I really sincerely appreciate the inclusion of the mode, and it was giving me some happy Time Splitters-esque vibes, but I just didn't have the interest to play through all of them. And that kind of sums up State of Emergency 2, really. If you want to know what the game is like, leave some Wonder Bread out on the counter overnight, and then take a bite the next morning. As you bite into that stale bread, I want you to feel your insulin sensitivity decreasing.
Can you feel the diabetes coming on? Enjoy having one leg.
What? Anyway, at least the people that made this game came to work every day, stuck it out, and had the gumption to finish what they started. Which is more than you can say for fucking Freedom Fighters 2.